The new Labour Socialist government has their first budget in October. In this episode of Property Answers, John and I will take a little look into what we think the budget may have in store for us as property investors and developers. Hi, John.
Hello.
So this is the first episode we've filmed with the Socialists now running the show.
The lunatics running the asylum,
How
you could argue.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it's easy to be very negative, isn't it, and very concerned. They made a dreadful start, which is quite interesting because normally, of course, every new government has a honeymoon period, normally of 6 to 9 months, a year even. This lot didn't manage a week. So, you know, you've got to be careful what you wish for, haven't you, really?
The first 100 days hasn't been good, but they have also talked down the economy quite a lot, which seems amazing, really, because there is some evidence that people are sort of waiting and seeing a little bit, which is bad news for an economy in general. And they've also leaked a lot of bad news, and you know there is this school of thought that what they do is they leak out the worst case scenario.
Yes.
They see what pushback there is, and then what comes out. I mean, it's classic torture technique, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, you give them, and then you say, well, it's not as bad as what was leaked.
It could, absolutely, and you're absolutely right there. And what's happening, because they've made the 30th of October sound like it's going to be Armageddon, it's going to be terrible, terrible, terrible. It's really affected the estate agents, the sales market, and in my agencies, you know, we've noticed the last few weeks a real drop off, especially at the high level, and we were going quite well. We were going quite nicely. All of a sudden, we've slowed right down. Now, will it affect anybody that dramatically on the 30th of October? We'll have to see. But if you're buying a house now or selling a house now, I cannot see that it really is going to affect them from day one. It's a bit like a general election. General election comes along, the market always slows down, but really, there's no real reason for that in a way, because anything that they bring in isn't going to affect anyone immediately. Well, I say that, I might be wrong there, because of course, I think certain things they may have to bring in terms of tax immediately. Otherwise, what happens is you get a crescendo, everyone's selling and getting on with things before the deadline, and then after the deadline it bombs.
Yes, but I think there is some evidence on. I saw a statistic a couple of days ago on sales of properties over £1 million nationally.
Yes.
Not doing too well.
No, and that's where we are with the estate agency,
exactly.
I would say.
And that's a direct result of all this leakage about what they're going to do with council tax. Council tax is likely to far more be draconian, because it's the politics of envy, isn't it? You dare to have £1 million plus home, you will have to pay a lot more to empty out your bins.
Well, of course, the cabinet, every member of the cabinet they consider to be working class. They all think they're working class, which is amazing when some of them earn £500,000 a year, but there we go. But you're right, and they're talking about this, you know, the rates. I mean, the rates in this country, and I know I'm going to get a load of viewers about to say, a comment that actually, John, you're wrong. But actually, when you think about it, the rates we pay in this country, residential rates, are pretty cheap. For what we get, they're pretty cheap. And if you live in Chelsea, near where the hell you live, which is the wealthiest borough, they pay the least, which is absolutely bonkers when you think about it, because it's a wealthy borough.
It's about essential services.
Every local authority is in all sorts of financial difficulty, all sorts, and social care is taking up 60 to 70% of the budget for most of these councils. So they've got to raise more money.
There was a report last week where 4 councils said that more than half of their council tax is going to short-term emergency housing, which is ludicrous. Yes. And then there is the bloated...
Well, it's ludicrous unless you're a landlord. Who's benefiting from it?
No, well, I don't think they should benefit from the taxpayer. They need to benefit from doing stuff in the private sector. The taxpayer shouldn't be paying for a bloated public sector. The town halls have too many people. I mean, my comment is, in the private sector, people WFH, work from home. in the public sector, it's just FH.
That's for you, that's very good.
It's bloated. It needs to be cut
agree.
back by 2/3. The pension scheme needs to be looked at. People approaching retirement get double, treble promotions so that they're on the final salary just as they leave. All these practices need to be rooted out, and the council tax lowered.
It didn't happen
for our
under. It
essential
didn't happen
services.
under a Tory government, and it's certainly not going to happen under a Labour government. So you can rant as much as you want, Ranjan. You can rant as much as you want, but let me tell you, as you know, and all our viewers know, that isn't going to happen.
No, so, okay, council
But what
tax,
is going to happen? What do we think is going to happen?
What do we think is going to happen? There's going to be something on council. That's already fed into this
Yes,
£1 million
Angela Rayner,
plus.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
There's going to be, and there's capital gains tax. Capital gains tax, of course, paid by individuals, and it's going to be possibly equalised with income tax.
And that is a massive blow for people. I mean, my goodness. I've got a friend of mine who's selling a business at the moment. He says if it doesn't sell by the 30th of October, if it's not completed by the 30th of October, he's not going to do it. And you can imagine that across the country, how many people are saying the same thing. All these things, they strangle the economy. Because he sells a business probably to someone from abroad. Yeah, he's got a load of cash. What does he do with it? Spends it. Spends it on different things. It's like if they stop you and me and others like us developing property because we're going to pay too much social housing or whatever it might be, that goes up. We don't do it. What does that mean? It means less carpets are bought, are made. Less kitchens are manufactured.
What do you think about
all the rest of it? So it's not just it's the knock-on effect all these things will have, and that's what you've got to remember. It's not just someone paying more tax. It's not as simple as that.
What do you think about the lefty argument that income tax is this rate, so capital gains tax should be the same same rate as that? That is fair.
Well, I think basically there are entrepreneurs in this country, and anyone who pays capital gains is probably a former entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur takes chances, takes risks. We might de-risk them. We're always talking about de-risking as much as possible. But we are employing people. We are taking risks. We are aspirational. You take that away from people. One of my first and only backers, Mr. Boyce, in the mid-70s, he was paying 95% super tax. And he said, okay, it's only for the top slice of 1% in the UK. Of course, you'll be 1% of the UK. I'm not sure I am.
I'm at the peasant end.
Well, I'm at the peasant end of it, but we're still there probably just. And there's some achievement, I suppose, in life. You can say, great, well done. You're going to pay a load more tax. Oh, and by the way, we haven't talked about inheritance tax yet. And then you die. But anyway, and he said friends of his were they might have a factory employing 100 people. They were thinking of employing 200. They're not going to do that anymore. They just buy a yacht and sail around the world instead. They don't need to do it. You've got to encourage entrepreneurs to actually get off their backsides and do things, or carry on doing things. And you're not going to do that by penalising them with a large capital gain tax.
I've always said that we're all human beings, and we all have the same sort of mindset and the same sort of way of thinking.
Yeah.
So a lot is made of the mindset of some people on benefits who say it's not worth my while working.
Yeah.
Now, we are no different from that mindset. If we are an entrepreneur and it's not worth us doing that little bit more or growing the business a little bit more
or taking those
because
risks.
It's punitive, or taking those risks. Exactly. It's all human nature.
Absolutely it is.
So the incentives should be based on, reach for the stars.
Absolutely. And most landlords in the UK, not every landlord, most of us, and I'm talking about landlords because there's 2.4 million of us in the UK, don't need to buy any more property, don't need to put that extra effort into work. They've got income, they've got assets and so on. So they're the people you've got to encourage. And even under the Tory government, they didn't really encourage us, did they? We hear Section 24 and they were bringing in Section 21 anyway and all the rest of it. So they weren't encouraging us either, to be honest with you.
It's going to be a very, very odd situation, I think, because I think it's not people who own properties in a company are not affected. First of all, that's corporation tax when you sell them in a company.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's people who have got one or two properties, perhaps bought them for a pension and that kind of stuff. But the other thing is, what it does is it means that you get property blockers, because if you can't sell your property before the CGT comes in, you're more likely to just keep it on forever.
Absolutely.
And that property may be best in the hands of an owner-occupier or someone else. You've got to let capital cycle through the economy.
What it does, Ranjan, it causes stagnation. Whether you are going to expand your company and employ another 10 people, or you may well not do. It causes negativity. And anything that causes negativity and stagnation cannot be good. I mean, you take inheritance tax, huge problem for many people in this country. They say, oh, it only affects the top 2% or whatever it is. That's irrelevant, because the money filters down to all those the relatives, members of the family who then go and buy a house and refurbish it and all the rest of it when people die. If the majority of that tax is going to the taxman, that never happens. And I've been, and we speak about it on the odd occasion that you buy me lunch or dinner, which is odd, but there we go.
It's very good dinner. It's not odd at all.
I'm always banging on about my inheritance tax problem, along with a lot of my friends of my age. You're slightly younger, but even so, my accountant says, much is a slight over-exaggeration as usual, but I mean, my accountant said, well, you should have started 20 years ago, John. It's too late, to a great extent. So, and I've got other friends who say, well, I don't care, I came with nothing, I'll leave with nothing. But that's, you want to pass something on to your family, surely, in my view. Some people say, well, look, I'm not going to worry about it, John, because Tories will be back in by the time I die. Well, they might or might not. And of course, they'll change it. Well, they may not change it, because actually, having another government do your dirty work for you is actually quite useful. You don't need to then change it necessarily, or change it down to what it was. I mean, it's 40% already over, 350,000 or jointly 700,000, whatever it is. It's a huge amount of tax, and it's only going to be increased. And they're going to also, I think, say land has to be part of it. So at the moment, all these very wealthy individuals in the UK... The
farm scam, you mean?
Yeah, buy farmland because it's inheritance free. But I think that's going to be brought in as well. That's what I'm told by my accountant. Whether they're right, we'll see. In which case, that is a hell of a blow to a lot of people.
What about growth? Because really the housing market, the property market, rental market, sales market, commercial property market prospers when there's economic growth.
Yes.
And yes, there have been some figures out in the last week or so about growth, but that is mainly from what happened under the Conservative regime.
Absolutely. They can't have
all getting better.
Exactly.
But growth is stagnating. Rachel Thieves always talks about growth and how much growth we need, but there's no real policy for it.
They're doing the opposite, aren't they? I mean, they might come up.
Are you expecting anything about growth in this budget?
I think there has to be, and I think they will have things in there for growth for
the public sector.
For the public sector, like more people employed, but also I think they will do something for commerce in there as well, in some shape or form. I mean, the Conservatives brought in these free ports, and they're all over the UK. And actually, say free port, where you don't pay any rates in those areas, and you get tax.
Oh, I thought that's a drink you gave me after dinner.
Yeah, that's after dinner. At the country house, that's my butler serves that normally. I wish. You have to be invited first, though, Ranjan. So, but the free ports actually it's a Harwich's one in Essex, but it's actually 20 miles as well inwards. So it's not just the actual port. Now you in those areas you get rate-free tax incentives and so on. So I think they might encourage businesses like that, to expand that type of thing. So there will be things which are positive in the budget, but for property investors and developers, I don't think there will be much, if anything.
Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, who of course, a fun fact about Angela Rayner?
Give me one.
She's the only one in her class at high school who left at 16 with more babies than GCSEs.
Well,
so that's the intellectual
Ranjan,
powerhouse
I got told off on social, I think it was on TikTok, I think, for being derogatory towards her ability.
Oh no,
not about her personality, but her ability. And I got, give her a chance, da 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 da.
Oh well,
it's unbelievable.
Put your comments in the comments below. But Angela Rayner said, which is a worrying comment, I think, for everybody, whether they're investors or homeowners. She actually said that homes are not assets, they're homes.
They're only assets when she sells them and doesn't pay the tax like she should have done on hers, because it was a second home. But anyway, there we go. We won't go into that one.
So it doesn't sound as though there is going to be, or are we expecting anything that is going to be positive
for the property investor,
developer, or small business person?
I think if the small business person, they may well be. Although on the small business person, don't forget that it's rate free up to, I think, 12,000 rateable value at the moment. The rates are written off. Commercial rates. I think they'll bring that back. Now, what a lot of people don't realise is that the local authority only keep 10% of commercial rates. The rest go to the government. So for the government, that's a really big payday for them. So if they can have small business starting to pay rates again, that brings in a lot of money. Now, I think the rates should be collected on VAT, with VAT on turnover, be a much fairer way of doing it.
Very difficult.
I don't think it's that difficult. I know you said that before, Ranjan, but once again, I think
I've got a shop.
Once again, I think you're wrong. Well, the online store should be paying similar. It should be both, in my view. And the government, the Tory government, kicked this can down the road for 14 years, and I don't hear that Labour are going to do any different.
And what do you do about the likes of Amazon, who you have on the receipt, it's based in Ireland or something?
Well, you have to have a mechanism.
You
have to have a mechanism for collecting that. But don't forget, the American companies pay their tax in America, and the British companies that are in America pay their tax in the UK. So it's not quite as simple as people think with this, they're not paying any tax. Well, they are, but it is a different scenario. And I wouldn't disagree. How can anyone compete with Amazon? But of course, Amazon are investing huge amounts of money in warehouses. So there are large property companies in the UK benefiting immensely from Amazon, because they're building warehouses, they're renting it to them, and they're selling them on yields of 4 or 5% to pension funds. So a lot of people watching, they may not realise, but if they've got a pension, there's a pretty good chance that they are investing already in an Amazon warehouse somewhere. What goes around comes around, goes around, all the rest of it.
I mean, on the subject of pensions, I think.
Yeah.
I think
they're going to knock them, definitely.
Yeah, but I don't think it's very good, because I think when people do pension planning, they're planning for decades, and to tinker with it, like for example.
Yeah, but they can. Their view is the people that plan pensions over a long period of time, private pensions, they can afford to pay some tax on that, and of course. Under the last Tory government, they got rid of the tax on pensions. This lot will definitely bring it back in some shape or form.
But I think that's not the issue, John. I think the idea is you're making your pension contributions under one set of rules.
Yes.
You're doing it over decades.
Yes.
For example, if you've been making pension, I met someone at Baker Street who was very concerned about what they had relied on, the fact that at 55 they can draw a quarter of their pensions pot.
Yes.
And they were going to use that to pay their own home mortgage.
Yeah, because it's tax free.
That was planning that they'd done over 20 years.
That's going to be chopped, isn't it?
So it's fundamentally unfair, particularly if you're going to be, if they were going to be 55 next year. So all that planning.
I agree with you. And the other thing, which is the sort of average pension contribution from a private company is between 3 and 5% or something. Bear in mind that most of these civil servants are getting 20 to 25% of their salary put into a pension for them. I mean, it's massive. It's a massive. Sometimes they're not paid that well, I agree with you, but they get massive pensions at the end of it.
Yeah, sounds a bit like George Orwell's Animal Farm again. But I think the other effect on property investors are the people that invest in commercial property through a pension.
Right, yeah.
At the moment, of course, if you have a SAS, directors can contribute £60,000
Yes.
a year from profit before tax from their company into a pension, and then they can use that on to buy commercial property. I mean, if you have got a SAS pension and you got one set up, you should bring forward any contributions you make before the budget.
Subject
take
to your
advantage of
accountant's
that.
advice.
Subject to accountant's advice, of course. But the point I'm trying to make is that that will affect people's ability to build their pot in order to do commercial property.
Absolutely will. But you know, really to summarise, the ones who have got it, what's the saying they've used? The wealthiest in this country are the ones who are going to have the broadest shoulders.
I hate that phrase.
And that's what they've been saying all the way through, and I've got no reason to think, I'm sure you agree with me, that will be any different, I'm afraid.
But do you think, there's always the straw that breaks the camel's back, and if the onus is too much on taxation and too much on ideological taxation based on socialist ideals, and there's nothing there on growth, do you think that the markets could kick back and rein in some of this in the same way the markets didn't agree with
Liz Truss? Liz Truss didn't do too much wrong, apart from she didn't plan it over a 3-year period. She wanted to do it in about 30 seconds. If she did it over a 3-year period, said, look, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is how we're going to start. We're going to talk to the markets, talk to the Bank of England, talk to everyone, and do it in a phased basis. I think a lot of people would have gone along with it. The fact, very naive, didn't do so, was worried about the election, I'm sure, and thought, I've got to do this before then, which I don't think they had to. I think they could have got so far before the election and then done more afterwards. And most people I know in the Tory party, and I'm quite close to a number of people, as you know, is that actually most people didn't really disagree with what she was trying to do. She just did it in the wrong manner and far too fast and far too naively.
But do you think the markets will kick back?
Well,
do you think they've got the carte blanche to do what they want?
Well,
because they've got a massive majority.
I think from the massive majority they have, of course, can do what they want. The one thing that concerns me is inflation, because if you keep giving people higher than inflation pay rises, and I can understand why they've done it. A lot of these trade unions have held off because they know or knew that Labour were going to get in. The fact all that's happened, and the fact that every one of those cabinet ministers used to be a civil servant, virtually everyone. They are going to look after those civil servants, and the civil servants in this country must be the biggest employer apart from the NHS, I'd have thought. So they're all going to get huge pay rises. And once one party gets a pay rise of certain, then the rest want them. So I think to keep inflation at 2.5% is going to be very difficult. In which case, to get interest down to say a 4%, even 4%, which is okay, I think, in my view, is going to be very difficult.
What you've just done is predicted a perfect storm, because I agree with you. With that with that public sector, no, I'm just going to extrapolate from what you've said. With these public sector pay rises and so many people working in the public sector, it's going to be virtually impossible to keep a lid on inflation. The target is 2%. Yes. The problem that we have now is that the Fed has cut 0.5%, and they've indicated another 0.5%. And if you look at the graphs over the last 20 years, we have to be neck and neck with the Fed, also the ECB. We will be then too out of kilter, and that will affect our economy drastically. Because we just can't be too out of sync with the Fed. It's a global world. So that must put the shackles on what this government can do.
Well, I think it puts the shackles on what they can do, because then they're borrowing more money, and they're borrowing more money at higher interest rates because our interest rates haven't come down. But I do think, in terms of commerce, I think they've got to show this budget. They've got to show some empathy for well, certainly for the working class person, whoever they are, they think they're all working class, the cabinet, by the way, which is unbelievable. There we go. And I think they've got to show some light at the end of the tunnel for them. But I think, unfortunately, for landlords and investors and the people with pensions, private pensions, they're going to be very tough on us all.
Let's talk about exit taxes. What do you think about that?
I don't understand it. What is an exit tax?
This is for people that dare to... I mean, the UK has lost some 9,000 millionaires in the last year. It's doubled since the previous year.
Yeah.
It's more millionaires are expected to leave the country. Not just millionaires, but also middle-class professionals are leaving the country.
Yes.
And there's talk of imposing some sort of exit tax.
That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's what an insight into a government that has to impose an exit tax because things are so wrong in this country, or potentially going to get so wrong, and people are so worried that they're going to leave the country that you've got to penalise them for doing so. I mean, it's appalling.
It is. It's
absolutely appalling. And I understand what you're saying now. And I've had a lot of friends of mine, most of which are joking, saying, "Oh, I'm going to leave the country. I'm doing this. I'm doing that." But let me tell you, Mrs. Howard the other day started talking about moving to Portugal. Now, she didn't mention about me going with her, so I'm not sure. All right. She didn't even say I could visit, but she's talking about, well, why don't we go, we're thinking about Portugal. The kids will come with us, the children, there's good schools out there. There's 10-year tax breaks for people going into Portugal. You get a European passport if you invest £500,000, or did do, into the Portuguese economy. So, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people talk about it, don't they? How many people do it? A lot of young people have gone to Dubai, of course. We all know people who've moved to Dubai.
Of course,
tax-free.
I've been a big fan of Charlie Mullins over the years, Pimlico Plumbing.
What's he up to?
At the age of 71, he's up sticks. And he's announced he's leaving the UK for these sort of things. But I think on one side, we are a nation where we say we like to create the environment to say we're the best place in the world to do business. Yes. Come along and do business here. Yes. And if you're going to say not give the freedom to let people come and go if they please, what's the difference between North Korea shooting people at the border when they escape to the south?
I think you're exaggerating.
I know I'm exaggerating.
Dramatically, Ranjan, and I think...
people should be free. That's my point.
Of course, and conservatism is all about small government. Labour is all about a big government controlling everybody and everyone being fair. I mean, look at the school fees. I mean, that's absolutely bonkers, putting VAT on school fees, because that's all it's going to do is hurt everybody. Because the school classes for the comprehensives are going to get bigger. The people, of course, who are moving from their kids from private school. And of course, it might be they can afford one child at the extra 20%, but if you've got two, that's an extra 40% and all the rest of it. They're motivated enough for their children's education to probably go into move to the right areas to get into the grammar schools and all the rest of it, which of course will push product prices up higher in those areas. So that's a bit of a tip for anyone that's looking to buy a bit of a deal and refurbish a house. Buy one, try and buy one in within the vicinity of a very good school, because there will be an extra 10% value of those, because these people have been paying $20,000 a year for school fees. They've suddenly got them for nothing. They can add a bit. They can pay a bit more for the house.
I think there's a lot to unpick here with the forthcoming budget.
Absolutely.
And I think the issue is that how much of it is it about balancing the books and creating the environment for growth and a good economy, as opposed to how much of it is about appeasing the hard left in the Labour Party and their ideological.
And I think the education thing, the school fees, the VAT on school fees, I'm sure Starmer couldn't care less about it. But that's to appease the left of the party, the Angela Rayners and so of the party. But I would reiterate, there will be some positive things in this budget, but I don't think there'll be for the people like us, the people watching this, property investors, property developers. I don't think there'll be anything in there positive, unfortunately, for them.
Okay, I'm going to slightly disagree.
Well, what a surprise.
Let me say this, because I mentioned this joke about Angela Rayner not being the sharpest tool in the shed. You know, I mean, none of them are that sharp. I've seen the Prime Minister on his interviews to Keir Starmer and all of that. He doesn't seem that sharp.
Not
David
for
Lammy.
Considering he's a barrister,
Considering,
by the way.
yeah.
I mean,
I
he's
haven't
pretty
seen that.
poor, isn't he?
Did you see that clip of David Lammy on Mastermind where he was asked the question?
He's very limited. He's got limited ability. Shall we put it like that?
He was asked the question on this Mastermind program, who succeeded Henry VIII? And his answer was, do you know?
Henry the Ninth?
No, he said Henry VII. So my point is, these are not the intellectual brains of Britain. So whatever they do, once the dust settles, it'll be riddled with unintended consequences and opportunities.
Yes.
There will be threats,
yes,
right? But they won't have the intellectual nous to do it all, so that they don't create some unintended consequences.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I wouldn't disagree.
We'll unpick them.
We'll unpick them. And the other thing is, you know, when there's a bit of blood on the street, we quite like that. There'll be people in the property industry, and it is an industry, you must remember that it's a massive industry, a massive business, property is. And there will be people that suffer from this. But there'll always be people who will benefit as well, in some shape or form. And that's what we've got to remember. You know, you've got to drive your business forward, and you have to pivot to whatever suits the market.
So we've basically got a new socialist government. And you know what? New socialist governments have the same deluded mindset as Leonardo DiCaprio's newest girlfriend. Do you know why?
Are we able to show this on?
Absolutely.
Okay, go
well,
on,
a new
carry
socialist
on. I'm just looking after your.
A new socialist government thinks, just like Leonardo DiCaprio's latest girlfriend thinks, you know what, it doesn't matter who came before me, they've tried it in Venezuela, they failed, they tried it in Cuba, they failed, they tried it in the Soviet Union, they failed. You know, we have the brains, we can do it differently, it was all in the implementation. Just like Leonardo's new girlfriend, they think, you know, all the others, he ditches them at 25, you know, but I am sexier and brainier, I've got a better body, I can do all of this.
They didn't understand him.
They didn't understand him like I do. I can make him stick with me into my late 20s. And you know what? Whether you're Leonardo DiCaprio's latest girlfriend or a new socialist government, the delusion is the same.
And they've only got 5 years, at the most.
So tell us what you think in the comments below. Stay tuned for more.